So welcome everyone to the Reuben Hoare Library Trustees meeting of January 5th. We'll start with a presentation from Johnson Roberts on the new library, the plans for the new library. If people have comments, please come up to the podium, your name and address, and we'll take them at an appropriate time during the presentation.
So, hi everyone. My name is Philip O'Brien. I'm with Johnson Roberts Associates, architects. I'm a principal with Johnson Roberts. We are a small architectural firm that really focuses on library design. We have helped a number of public libraries over the years to apply for a Board of Library Commissioners grant, and actually in the last 20 years, we've in the 3 last grant rounds, I think we've had 35 different communities that we've helped apply for, and that has resulted in 35 grant awards. So we've got a pretty good track record, and we've got some pretty good experience working with the Board of Library Commissioners. We've also done a number of library projects from beginning right through to the end, and we just recently completed our 30th public library project, and that opened up just recently in October in Augusta, Maine. So I feel like we know public library design pretty well, but what we don't know that well, but we're learning, is what kind of library design, what kind of services, what kind of building, what kind of facility is really going to work the best for you all in Littleton, and that's why we're here. So I wanted to kind of give you just a brief overview of where we're at, and feel free to kind of jump in and ask me questions, or anybody else here that can help. I'm sure that's fine. I don't mind being interrupted. The last thing that I will tell you before I jump right into this is that in the overall scheme of things of where we are in the design process, is we are very early in the design process, so things are very fluid. We're in what's called the schematic design phase right now. And when we finish this portion of the schematic design phase, we'll be about halfway through schematic design when we apply for a grant. Once the grant comes back, which is this summer, the grant readers will have a lot of input, and we'll end up taking all their input, their feedback and so forth, and talking about it as a group with you all, and all the other new great ideas that come from the trustees and from the committee and from the public, and work that into the design. And so in the end, you will end up with a building that is different from what I'm going to show you tonight. It invariably will be. But I just wanted to let you know. After the schematic design comes design development, and in that kind of it's a lot like what it sounds like. We'll develop the building in more detail. We'll develop the electrical and mechanical systems. We'll be able to tell you what kind of HVAC systems, mechanical heating and ventilating equipment, what kind of plumbing. So at the schematic design level, I won't be able to answer those questions. I can speculate based on all the other library works projects that we've done. So we're really just at the big picture stage at this point. Where we started was with your building program. We did an analysis of the building program that was prepared before we were hired and submitted to the Board of Library Commissioners for approval. We reviewed that numerically based on our experience, working through all the numbers. And really what the building program is a list of all the different spaces that you need, what's going to happen in each of those spaces, and then what kind of equipment and materials need to be in each of those spaces in order to be able to accommodate all the services that the library wants to provide. So we analyzed that, and we found out that things look great. There was a couple little adjustments that we made, high and low, on some of the sizes, but basically the building program looked good to us. The second thing we did was a graphic analysis. So we took all those numbers, all that equipment, and we put those into scale, drew up each of these little blocks. So each of these little rectangles represents an individual space. Sometimes it's a room with walls and a door, and sometimes it's just a space. And a lot of these kind of more open spaces can kind of be put together contiguously and create larger open spaces. But so for example, this yellow represents the children's department, and up in the green you can see there's all the book stacks and some of the reading spaces. There's new materials and non-print materials and so forth. And we like to do this graphic analysis because once we put all the equipment in there, you can see what fits and what doesn't. And it also gives us another opportunity to kind of go back and fine-tune those numbers to make sure that we have the right size for your building. The next step is to take all these little colored blocks and start sliding them around, put them together into plans. And we went through a series of iterations of those plans in a variety of different places, different sites in town, and in different configurations on the site where we are right now. This is an overview, a site plan of where the current design is. There's your existing town hall, senior center, and the library sits at the end of the building right over here. So Shattuck Street runs along in here. Parking lot is at the rear, and this is the tennis courts. And then you've got the neighbor's property over in here. So right across the back of the parking lot, the grade drops down, and there's a ball field down on the lower field there. What we're suggesting is that the building get located on that slope site off of the right-hand side of the parking lot, and the parking lot actually get extended a little bit over to the right, around the back of the tennis courts. There's a little dirt road that runs down into the rear that would pretty much stay and get regraded a little bit, and this building would get tucked right into the site. So basically, if you were to come in the parking lot pretty much the way you do right now, the entrance of the building would be about right there, and it would appear to be a one-story building. And then when you go in, you can go downstairs because the grade drops off, and then there's a lower level that walks out to a patio at the rear. Okay, just kind of zoom in on that a little bit. So there's some new handicap parking here, some new parking that's associated over this right-hand side by the tennis courts. There's that dirt road that runs down. We're also contemplating a footpath that runs down and around and comes down and around and puts you down at the lower level at the patio at the rear. Because out of the back, you can walk directly out to a patio. You have a question?
How do you fire access down to the back?
The idea here is that there's a road. It's a little difficult to see here, but there's basically a road back in there right now. It's a gravel road that runs all the way around and services that field in the back. And we're going to improve that road so you could take a truck down there.
Yeah, we showed it to Chief Wazinski, and he was okay.
Gary, please come up to the microphone to speak.
Oh, sorry.
I'll just pass it.
That works. And you will, the fire department will access that road from Shattuck Street, not from the Russell Street School. That's the plan.
Right, there's a paved drive that comes off of Shattuck now that runs along the back there. We'd spur off of that. So this is the upper floor. This is where you would come in directly from the parking lot. You come in and there's basically you're on the main floor, and then if you go down a set of stairs or an elevator, it would take you down to the lower floor. So on this main floor, right in front of you when you come in, is a circulation desk. Off to the right-hand side is Popular Materials, audio-visual equipment. So if you're coming in, as soon as you get to this point, you have pretty good visual cues as to where you want to go. The book stacks are located along the left. Lots of computers and reading reference materials along in here. Some quiet study spaces that kind of poke out along on the right-hand side. This is your kind of popular materials for things like new books for folks that want to just kind of come in and browse and see what's new, pick up something, kind of check it out and go right out the door. You don't have to get buried into the back portions of the building. Right across from the desk is the circulation offices and workrooms, director's office, assistant director's spaces, and a couple of public toilets kind of tucked in here. And we've got a closed room here as the local history. So there's local history materials mounted on the walls here, and then there's some conference tables that sit in the center of that space. And then down here in the end, we have a young adult space for the teens. Good visibility from the desk and through the glass that looks into this space so that the teens have a place to go. The idea here is that the doors can kind of stand open during the day. And if it starts to get a little loud or rambunctious in there, you can shut those doors down and still keep the rest of the library quiet and still see what's going on in there through the doors. So we've got some study spaces and a nice little spot where you could take a look out towards the play fields and off to the parking lots off to the side. Again, fiction and nonfiction collections here. For the adults collections are up on the main floor. And then we've got computers, seating, some nice soft seating where you can take advantage of the views out to the woods at the back. There's a nighttime book drop that's located next to the workroom. So if you wanted to drop off a book when the library's closed, you can drop it in right here. It'll go into this fire-rated room, and then that's got easy access into the workroom here for the staff to pick those up. And if you come in and you wanted to go downstairs, you can either go right down the set of stairs here. There's an opening in the floor here, and some risers that you could sit on to read or to watch a presentation. Or you could take the elevator down at this point as well. Downstairs is the children's department, and there's a large meeting room and a conference room downstairs. And the reason I point that out is because in the evening, we can close down this area right here and lock off the rest of the library. So the lobby is still active in the evening. You could get into the lobby, you could go down the stairs, or you could take it down to the elevator. And then you could utilize those spaces in the evening. You can get into this conference room, get into this meeting room, you can get into these toilets, and the children's department and the rest of these spaces could all be locked off at night. Alternatively, you could take that walk down onto the patio and come in these doors if you wanted to do it that way. And again, access for the large meeting room here, or this conference room, and these kind of breakout spaces for things like intermissions, and if you wanted to put out snacks, or if you wanted to do a gallery show, there's a variety of different things you could do with that space. We've also set that up with some cafe-style tables for some for folks to kind of come and read, sit with their laptop, or if you brought in a cup of coffee or something and you wanted to do that and you wanted to stay away from the carpeted portions of the library, you could do that down here. In the children's department, we've got reader tables, computers, different size furniture for the various ages of children. We've got book stacks for the older kids and book stacks for the younger kids, and there's a little something here for everybody. There's a crafts and story room at the rear of the children's department, so that they can, for larger groups, they could certainly come over here, but for most things, they could do a craft project there, and they could leave their things out, set things up without getting in the way of the other programs that are happening at the library. And again, small size furnishings and so forth that suit the children. There's a family-style toilet here, so that the kids can use the toilet if a parent is in there with a couple of kids and one of them needs to use the bathroom, or if somebody needs to go in and help their younger children in there, they don't have to come outside into the toilets with the rest of the public. We've got a children's office here, children's desk, storage for the children's department. We got some staff spaces here, like a staff break room, locker spaces, some storage, a server room for the computer equipment, a friend's book sale room that can be used to store materials and also could be open to the public if you wanted to have a book sale. Or you could pretty easily move some materials out into this space and use that for a larger book sale if you wanted to do that. Like some folks have one annually and so forth. Mechanical spaces, general storage, and then off of the meeting room we've got a small kitchenette and a storage room that's associated with that, where you can put all your tables and chairs and so forth. Okay. Access directly to the patio at the rear from the children's department and from the lower lobby space. And then we've got a couple of images about what a building like this might look like. So this is the entrance, this is the drive that comes in from the road, from Shattuck. This is a portion of the parking lot. So there's your main entrance right there. We've got kind of a high light that brings some light down into the center portion of the building, because the building's getting large enough there. We want to make sure we get good light all around inside the building. There's that small reading area that kind of pokes out on the side of the building. Then we've got staff spaces along in here, and the young adults department down on the right. Just kind of pulls it around the corner there. There's the entrance, is that reading space. These are the windows that look down into the stacks, and these are the windows down in the children's department. So you can see what I meant there by it kind of looks like a one-story building when you first kind of look at it from the parking lot, but tucked underneath it is the second story as the grade drops away, and there's the woods at the rear. And pulled around to the opposite end is the entrance again. So this is the young adults department in the end of the wing here. This is the walk that kind of wraps around, and then there's a set of steps that will also take you down to the patio at the lower level. And if we kind of walk down that path a little bit and take a look back, you can see there's young adults. This is the entrance that comes out of the meeting room. That's children's downstairs, and a set of doors that comes out of children's. Those are the quiet study rooms that poke out on the second floor. And that's kind of standing down off the bottom of the slope, looking back up. And so there's the patio in the foreground, quiet studies, children's department, the adults department up above. There's the new books and AV materials in there, and the circulation desk pretty much sits in the center of the plan. There's that lower lobby entrance into the meeting room and the conference room.
Cheryl Hardy-Fracci, 8 More Lane, also a staff member. The lower part there where you said the gallery space was going to be and cafe tables, is that windows? I can't really tell in this.
Yeah, sorry, that's a little foggy, but yeah, the idea is that it's windows along the rear side of the building. If I go back to the plan at the lower level,
Right.
that's glass right there looking out at the patio, and that's glass right there looking out at the patio.
So where's the gallery space if it's all glass?
We're taking advantage of these walls in here.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Maureen Woods, on Shelby Road. How big is the meeting room? For how many people?
This meeting room, I think is 80? Is it 80? I have that right?
I think it was 100.
That's 100. Or 100, 110? I can count up the chairs.
And do
but-
we have a meeting room now?
Yes.
That's my room. How big is that?
If it's 50, 49.
So you feel like you need double the space? For what groups? Like what's that? I don't know what groups would use that.
We have a lot of children's programming that goes on in there that has a large amount of people.
Right, you have a whole children's section.
No.
But summer reading, you can have a program, and you can have, we have to close it and cap it at 49 because of the room we have, or we have to right now, or we presently have to then utilize the multi-purpose room so we can accommodate more children during summer reading. And there is chronically a wait list of those children to participate in programs. So we are beyond capacity in many of the summer reading programs. There's always a wait list.
And outside groups too.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I did adult programming
Like
with
Cub Scouts
Ansel Adams,
might
yeah.
meet there, or the garden club, or.
Yep.
Okay, and then the conference room is for the employees?
No.
That's right next to it?
That's also available for the public.
So right now, the library has 3 meeting rooms. There's the Cooper Room, which will hold about 50 people. There's a small meeting room where you can fit 10, maybe
10 to
10, but
12.
not very comfortably. And then there's a room upstairs that you can squeeze in 4. And I do mean squeeze in. So we're trying to, so the conference room on the lower level there, the little one maps kind of to our small meeting room. The large one maps to our larger room that we have now, and then there were reading rooms on the upper level that would replace our small room and be able to do like tutoring or things like that.
Okay, and on the first floor, the cafe that you have on the left, is that just cafe tables? It's a cafe?
Yeah, when I say cafe, I'm not suggesting that
Right.
Sam is going to start making
Yeah,
coffee
that's
and
the question, right.
get a barista license or something. The idea,
exactly.
it's kind of an idea about the use of the
feel of the
space. So
space.
rather than a carpet on the floor, we'd probably do some kind of hard surface. If you brought a cup of coffee in or a snack for your kids, you could do that there and, feel better than walking into a carpeted portion of the library and trying to do it there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Andy Curran, I work at the library, 20 Middlesex Drive. I just wanted to say about the meeting rooms, that they're they're in constant use. We have people tutoring, we have people who work from home, we have students meeting and working on projects, we have Cub Scouts, we have the garden club, it's a huge, we need meeting rooms because, people need to use them. So we're hoping to provide more.
I can tell you that every building that we've opened that has had meeting spaces like this, they're booked constantly.
Also on the meeting rooms, the goal would be that they're wired for LCTV going forward, right? Like the fire station meeting room will be, at least the large meeting room will be. I don't know if the other ones, if the smaller one would be or not, but the large one would be wired for LCTV.
Hi, Gary Froy, 15 Mill Road. Sorry for asking a question without using the microphone last time. Couple of questions that there haven't been to any earlier meetings. The program, I'm assuming this is a larger program than what we currently have, and if so, where were the major areas of growth from the current library?
I didn't write the program. That was written before I was started, so.
So larger areas of growth would be the children's room, conference room, meeting rooms, meeting spaces, study rooms. We have 2 right now, well, 1 really, and we'll add 3 more, because like I said, we constantly have meetings and tutors and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, the whole program is found on our website. It's at littletonlibraryproject.org. You can see the whole program there. It's about 150 pages.
I was just curious where the main areas of growth were. So in terms of
The children's room.
book rack storage and stuff like that, not much so much. Background infrastructure, that's pretty much the same. It's pretty much those amenities that we're talking about. Okay. And then if there are any discussions about any sustainability measures, anything that you're looking at trying to do?
Yes, we are actually pursuing LEED certification for the building because the Board of Library Commissioners has additional grant money available. And so that is, we do have an eye on that. There's a minimum grant amount of $100,000 in addition to your grant. Your grant amount is probably large enough that it would be more than that to get certified. I think it's 2.5% of your grant in addition, and the minimum is 100 grand. So my guess is that being certified will, at 2.5% of your grant will be higher than that. I haven't done that calculation, so I couldn't tell you exactly. But all of the things that you put into the building that will help you to meet LEED certification are eligible for reimbursement. And the reimbursement is about half in kind of rough numbers. Okay. And so in addition to them paying for half of the whole building, with a couple of minor exceptions, they will pay for half of all your LEED certification efforts as well. And then in addition, there's another 2.5% if you reach LEED certification.
Are we just talking basic LEED certification, not silver or anything else?
We're looking at basic at this point. Yeah, certification at the certification of the bronze level, right?
Right, the basic
level.
Right.
That's right.
And are you, what kind of things are you thinking about?
So some of the things that we've thought about are photovoltaic arrays. We haven't shown any on the model at this point, but those are the things that we're talking about. High efficiency mechanical systems. We're looking at photo capture on natural lighting. So we'll have natural light sensors that will, when we take advantage of these large windows that we have along this portion of the building, when they shine in, it'll automatically dim down the lights closest to the windows so that we have even light throughout the building. Solar harvesting, I think, is what the engineers call it. So there'll be a variety of things that we have like that we're thinking about trying to take advantage of. So water efficiency and indoor air quality and
recycle materials and
right,
that kind of stuff.
There's lots of different credit points you can go for, right? Some of them are worth more, like energy efficiency. The higher your energy efficiency, I think there's 19 points in that category, and then there's others that if you use a certain amount of recycled materials, 50% of your materials have a minimum amount of recycled, you're going to get 1 point out of it. So there's certain things you can do. Certified wood. If all the wood in the building is certified, you can get 1 point for that. But there's a fair amount of money that you have to pay for that.
Right.
So you have to decide whether or not you want to go for that.
Where your big bang for the buck is.
Right. So that's, the idea of going for certification is that it's going to get you a fair amount of money in terms of additional grant money from the Board of Library Commissioners, but you're not going for silver or gold. Well, you really have to pay for those additional points. They start to get more expensive as you start to get higher, so.
Anything on the innovative side regarding energy usage, like solar or recirculation or?
We'll get into that in design development. We have to kind of make some assumptions at this point about the types of systems and so forth that we have because we don't have any engineers on board at this point to talk to about it. So we've made assumptions about what we can do based on what we've been able to accomplish in other buildings.
Okay,
But
great, thank
we
you.
may have an induction system, for example, in the building, which is a type of heating system where we're using air current, 100% fresh air, to induce circulation in the space. And so the induction units kind of look like a 2x4 or a 4x4 light fixture. They're kind of large, and the air comes down out of the center. It blows down high pressure, and that induces the air to circulate back up and return in. Because all of the air is coming in fresh, it all comes from a centralized unit. There's only one place where you have filters. It's really quiet because right up above this unit there isn't a fan. Like you may have a variable air volume system in here, and there's fans and there's lots of things that make noise and so forth. So this is really quiet, great fresh air, and really, really efficient because everything's all centralized. And the ducts are a lot smaller because they're using high velocity air injection. So that's what we've been doing in some of our libraries recently. That's worked out. That's an example, but we haven't designed that system.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Brian Tarbuck, 16 Fletcher Lane. Disclosure, I'm friends with a bunch of the librarians. I love this plan. I did some calculations today, and I figured out, based on the stuff that my family has checked out, this year would have cost us at least $600 to get the materials that we checked out of the library this year. So I'm thrilled that you guys are having this wonderful plan. I'm thrilled to hear that there'll be another room that can be, where committee meetings can be videotaped. And I'm thrilled that there'll be more conference rooms. I know people who are using the conference rooms to set up small businesses, so it all seems great. Carry on.
Don't be getting a bill in the mail.
I get the bill from the town 4 times a month, 4 times a year. And happy to pay it.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Cindy Napoli, Springfield Drive. I just had a question about the parking. It looked like in the plan you proposed to add 19 additional parking spaces compared to what currently exists on the site.
Did you do the math?
There's like one little note within the drawing.
Yeah.
I was just curious if you believe that's going to be ample parking, based upon, especially since you're proposing large meeting rooms and conference rooms. And the COA currently is on that site, the town offices are on that site.
We do feel that it's enough at this
Okay.
point. There's certainly some room for growth if we need to. What we're trying to do is we're trying to right-size the parking.
Okay.
Because we're going for LEED certification, one of the things that we'd like to avoid is to just put down as many parking spaces as we can find pavement space to put them down.
Right.
So we're trying to right-size it, and there's some additional points that are available for doing that. And we're trying to keep in mind the fact that we think a lot of the larger meetings that happen, based on our experience and the way that libraries are used, a lot of these larger meetings are going to happen in the evening when the town offices are closed and so forth. And you won't have as much activity. You won't have folks coming to use these play fields in the evenings as much as in the daytime and so forth.
Right.
So we think that we have enough on the plan to support the kind of complex, kind of
Right.
the entire campus.
Yeah, it seems like this end of the campus is more, I don't want to say congested, but if the library's there, the COA is on this end, but parking's been added to the left. I don't know what's going to go in at your old space when you build the new building, but it seems like all the parking, a lot of the activity would take place on this end of the campus. So I'm just curious about where, I just was there yesterday and it was so crowded during the day, there was hardly any parking.
Yep.
So I'm just curious with a building this size, with the increased traffic flow that you're expecting, where everybody's going to park, that's all.
Well, there's certainly some opportunities. We've only got the parking on one side here. You really could do another 20 spaces along that side as well. What that really means, though, is the building starts to move further back.
Right.
And we're trying not to
Right.
push it too far
I just
back.
know if anyone had talked to the town about that, about the requirements.
We've had a number of meetings with the town.
Okay.
But we're not at the point where
It's
anybody's
definitive,
kind of
yeah.
said approved.
Okay.
We won't get an approval from the town until we're much further along in the
Okay.
process. But in terms of the design and what we're planning for, based on the calculations we've done, we think that we have enough. We think we can make a good case for this amount. But if that doesn't fly and we need to add some more, we can.
Okay. All right, great, thanks.
Sure.
To clarify on the parking, we have talked to the planning board, and they're the ones that have the final say on the number of parking spaces. We haven't gotten word from them on exactly how many parking spaces would be required. And we will, obviously, before we go build. Anyone else?
Not graceful, but sit down. I'm Jackie Sakel at 74 Neshoba, and I was wondering if you could provide us with a high-level overview of the grant process, anyone, so that we get an idea of what the kind of milestones are leading up to getting the grant approved, and what the barriers for us for success would be. Like, what do we need to do to make this a successful process, and what have you experienced with the other libraries that you've worked with that have set them up for success so that they get the maximum that we would be eligible for. And likewise, I heard you say something about grant reviewers. How do you manage the grant reviewer input into the design, and how do we then as a town manage that input? How does that impact if they recommend something that goes over the budget that we are working within, do we then get disqualified from getting the grant because we are not accepting the grant reviewer's input?
Okay. Wow, great questions. So, do you want me to do the overview?
If you want.
Jump in so the Board of Library Commissioners has a grant process for a construction grant, and they also have planning grant money that they pass out as well. You get a planning grant? Yep. And so the planning grant that you applied for, you went through that application process before you hired me and before you hired your project manager.
$40,000 from the state for the planning grant and $20,000 from the town.
Tom, we can't hear you.
$40,000 for the grant, for the planning grant,
Yep.
and $20,000 from the town in 2014.
It was 13 or 14, something
Yeah.
like that, yeah.
Yeah.
That was at town meeting.
Yeah, that was approved at town meeting back in the May 2013 or 14 meeting, I don't remember.
So that's,
So the planning grant happened about 3 or 4 years ago that put us in this phase. We got about $40,000 from the state, the town gave $20,000. That's what's paying for the work that we're doing now on the site proposal and things like that. And then going forward, you can want to.
So, the next process was in applying for a grant. The grant application is due toward the end of January. It takes a couple of months for us to go through the process of this portion of schematic design. And so we got hired 6 months ago, 7 months ago, something like that?
A little more than that, I think.
A little more than that? It's been a while. So you hire your project manager first, and then they give advice to the building committee and helped kind of put together the ads and so forth so that somebody like me can get hired. And then we come on and we work with the building committee and the program to generate a schematic design. Now the schematic design basically it shows that it is feasible to put together a library that meets all the requirements that are shown in the program and that fits on the site. And as I mentioned, we looked at a variety of places, including additions and renovations to your existing building. We actually looked at this site. We looked at the Morgan property until we settled on this site right here. Yeah?
So for this January blah, blah, blah deadline,
Yep.
you need to have the schematic.
You need to have a schematic design put together, right? The schematic design doesn't need to be 100% complete, but it does need to explain what you're trying to accomplish. So you need.
Location have to be final?
The location needs to be final. Now, when I say location needs to be final, if this building was going to slide 100 feet that way or 100 feet this way, they're not going to complain.
Thereabouts.
If you wanted to build this building on the Morgan property with your grant, they wouldn't let you do that.
Yeah.
Okay? So in January, there's a big application that needs to get put together that needs to include the plans. There's a variety of different things they want to see, including these renderings and so forth that we've done. And then they want to know how much money you think it's going to cost. So we've done some cost estimating, and then we need to take all those numbers and put them into the forms that they've provided as part of the application. They're going to use those to base your grant amount on. Okay? At this point, I heard last night that there are now 33 communities that they're expecting to apply for a grant. They've got $150 million or something available immediately. And so what they will do is they will review all of the different communities and they will rank them from 1 to 33. And then they will calculate the grant amounts for all of them. And then they will just start at number 1 and they will add up the grant amounts for each of those 1 through 5, 1 through 8, 1 through 10. They will go as far as they can go for $150 million. And when they run out, that will be the first group. And that first group will get funded. The results come out in July. In July, the people that are, all 33 communities, or however many submit, will get ranked from 1 to 33. and then they'll say in that announcement, the first 12, the first 11, the first 15, the first 6, whatever, are going to get funded, and then the rest of them are on a waiting list. It depends on where you fall on that list when your number comes up. They may fund it the following year. The legislature may fund it. It may be a year and a half. It may be 2 years. They may fund another portion of it and take care of kind of the center third, and then the last third may get funded a couple of years from now. So it really depends on where you are in that overall list. Now, the number one thing in terms of ranking in that list is what the need is. Communities with a higher need are going to be closer to the top. So
What determines higher need?
the need is, how bad off is your building? How small, how inadequate, how old, how antiquated, how broken is it compared to what you need? So if you have an 800 square foot building and you've done a program and you need 20,000 square feet, and your building was built 150 years ago and the roof has fallen in, and it's inaccessible, and it's in the basement of a fire station, your needs are going to be pretty high. And there are towns like that. And so I would guess that your need is going to kind of, when I just kind of stand back, your need kind of falls into the kind of first third to the middle is what my guess would be.
Okay.
The other thing that I would point out, though, is that they take larger libraries, medium-sized libraries, and smaller libraries and kind of group them together so they can kind of spread it out. They also kind of think about the geography of it. Not the last grant round, but the grant round before, a lot of communities around in the Boston area and then kind of the eastern part of the state got funded, and a lot of people out west didn't. And they made a lot of noise. And so they've begun to think about that a little bit more. The next most important thing is how much support do you have in your community? And so when your community goes to town meeting and they vote yes, and they vote unanimously, or they support the building over and over again at town meeting, just how many people is at this meeting right now asking questions is important, and I would make a record of that. Maybe get some stills off of it and put it in your grant application, because anytime you can show community support is great. I have occasionally gone to a meeting like this in a community and nobody comes, and that's not great. It means nobody cares. It's clear that folks care in this town. Those are the two most important things. Now, do you need to have a plan that works? Yeah, but we've gone through this plan with the committee, and we've done it a bunch of times, and we've sat down with, there's a couple of representatives from the Board of Library Commissioners that travel around, and we've gone through this plan, and they've made recommendations, moved some things around and so forth. You asked a question about what kind of things will we hear back from grant readers?
Before you do, if you
yeah.
don't mind me asking, before we move on to that piece, because that will affect this question. In January, what dollar number are you planning to submit for this schematic?
We have a draft of the cost estimate right now. We had an independent cost estimator estimate this building for us.
Yeah.
And then we took that number and we put it into the chart that the Board of Library Commissioners has. And that chart includes everything you can imagine in terms of additional costs, from fees for folks like me to fees for removal of hazardous materials and engineers. Right. All the project costs are associated in it. And then on top of that, there's escalation costs. They will allow you to put 3 years of additional escalation. So you could put a percentage on, we're calling 5% per year for 3 more years on top of that.
Which is feasible based upon where we end up being ranked in terms of...
Right, right. Now, once they calculate your grant, the escalation is a reimbursable amount. So they will include the escalation in that amount, and everybody will get 3 years, and you'll get a portion of that come in. So if you vote to, if you're in the first group, or if you vote to move your building ahead and the money comes in later, in other words, if you're on the list in July and you're number 22 and you're not funded right away, if your community decides to move ahead and fund the whole thing and build the building now, when your grant money comes in, it will include the reimbursement on the 3 years of escalation, which you won't need, and you won't need to pay all of it. So it's just additional money that you'll have. And when your check comes in, it'll be one check for the whole thing.
How do you know what percentage of your building costs you'd be reimbursed for doing it that way?
They have a formula, and it's pretty clear. You total up the total amount of eligible costs. The first $3 million of eligible costs, they will refund. They will it will fund 50% of that. The next $3 million, they'll fund 45% of it. And then the next, between 6 and 15 million, they'll fund 40% of that.
What do we expect the grant to be able to fund for us? 75% of the total cost?
Oh, no, 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 50% is the max. So if you're building, if your whole project was less than $3 million, 50% would be the maximum.
And for a building of this size and scope, what is the typical average grant that you see?
I would say that you're probably looking at something like, if you take your total eligible costs, you're probably going to be looking at 47, 48%, something like that, of the total project costs that they will reimburse.
So back to the original question, though, in January, what number will you be submitting on the grant as the estimated cost of this project?
The total construction cost at this point, based on the estimate we've done right now, is about $8.8 million.
For construction?
For construction, okay? The fees and the furnishings and the equipment and all the other soft costs that go in there and so forth is about $1.3 million or so, something like that, if I
That
remember.
would include the parking spaces, the renovation of the fire access road.
That's right.
The patio.
Yep,
That stuff
all that stuff is in there.
is within the 8 million.
The fees, yes, right. And then the fees for people like me, your owner's project manager, the additional civil engineering and the hazardous materials and all other things, all those other folks that we need to hire, surveying, all that stuff. The furnishings, equipment, computers, telephones, servers, copiers, window shades, all that other stuff, all that adds up to about another $1.3 million or so. And then they will allow 3 years of escalation. 3 years of escalation on a project of this size comes out to about $3 million. And so they'll reimburse you half of that as well. When you total that all out, the cost, what this project would be for construction, plus all the soft costs, 3 years from today, is about $14.7 million in round numbers.
And I'm sorry, you may have answered this question, I didn't catch it, but the grant would reimburse on the cost of just the construction and not the soft stuff?
No, the
Okay, so all
soft,
of
the
it?
soft costs are eligible as well. So if you take that, $14.7 million,
Right.
47, 48%, I haven't really done the math yet, but it's going to be something like that.
Yeah. No, that's good news.
They'll pay for about half of that. So I mean, say $7 million is what you're looking at.
What are the typical construction overrun costs? Do you see a 2% overrun, 5% on?
We
average?
typically will recommend to communities to carry on a new building, on a new site, 5% contingency for construction.
Okay.
So that would be 5% of the construction cost. That is also an eligible cost. It's included in that 14.7, and they will reimburse you a portion of that as well.
Thank you. And then you're going to mention, I interrupted you, about the grant reviewers?
Yes, so you will find out where you are ranked in July. If you were in that first group that gets funded right away, you'll also get a notice from the Board of Library Commissioners, you've got an award. You will have 6 months after you get an award to vote your portion of the money and to get the project moving. Once you've voted that portion, you've got a certain amount of time, I think it's another year after that before you have to start construction, unless you apply for an extension. So you have 6 months to vote your portion unless you apply for an extension. And if your town meeting doesn't work, you know, they'll give you 30 days or 2 months or something just by calling them on the phone and saying, you know, town meeting is 7 months away, and you'll get that. If you wanted to wait another year, they probably wouldn't give you that. They'd probably just, if you get stepped over, if you don't vote your local money, if it fails a town meeting, you don't go to the end, you're out. And so if you're not in that first group, say you're number 20 or number 22, and then you get funded next year, you'll get a letter. You're up, you got an award. Once you get that letter, you'll have 6 months. The same thing will happen. You'll have 6 months to go to town meeting, vote your local portion of the funds, and then a year after that to get the building under construction. Those are the rough things. Now, the grant readers are made up of librarians, library programmers, architects, library professionals, construction professionals. They will typically have at least one person on each grant reader. Grant readers will set up in a group, 5 or 6 people in a group, and they'll probably review 10 or 12 And each of these groups will review 10 or 12 different, they'll all review them independently, then they'll get together with the people from the Board of Library Commissioners. They'll all talk about where they all are, and then they'll rank them. They'll ask for advice from the folks from the Board of Library Commissioners, but the Library Commissioners don't actually have any direction on who gets ranked where. They just provide advice. They'll compile all that information and they'll put the list together. They'll typically will have one person, sometimes two, in each grant reviewer, grant reader group that will come out and visit the building. They'll go visit the site. They'll talk to Sam and the staff and so forth. They want to get a better idea about what's going on. They may take pictures and so forth. They're really doing as much as they can to kind of understand what your issues are, how your building works, how this new solution is going to provide the services that you need in your building. They will all have recommendations, and we won't get access directly to the grant readers. When they meet with the Board of Library Commissioners representative, that person will take notes, and then they'll come and talk to you all about what the grant readers recommended. Now, when the grant readers recommend things, they will typically say things like, did you think about putting the young adults over here? Or have you thought about moving the director's office onto the lower level? Or have you thought about adding toilets in an XYZ place? And we will go through the pros and the cons of all these different things and talk about what works and what doesn't. They're not a mandate, they're recommendations. This is a schematic design, and at the point where we put this in for a grant, you have a very kind of complete looking plan, but I have never built a building that looks exactly like what we've submitted for a grant application. They always change. I've had buildings that have gone in as a 2-story building, and we've redesigned them as a 3-story building after they got a grant. The Board of Library Commissioners doesn't have a problem with that. What they want is they want to make sure that within a couple of percentage points, all the spaces that you show in here pretty much stay the same. They're going to want the relationships that they have to make sense. They're going to want to make sure that you design a building that functions. But other than that, they're not going to tell you what to do. So there's a lot of flexibility.
So the way this building looks in the drawings doesn't necessarily mean that's what it's going to be.
That's right. And if you don't like it, you should tell me, and you should tell these folks. My feeling's not going to be hurt. It's at some point.
It looks a little bland from the front. The back is fantastic.
Okay. That's great. That's just the kind of things that I'd like to hear. I think lots of times people feel bad about telling me that the building I designed looked awful. Now's the time. It's a lot easier for me to fix it now. But like I mentioned, we've done lots and lots of library designs. I want to design a building that's right for you in your town. So
Looks like a Catholic church.
In the grant reviewing process, I assume that they also look at the utilization, the circulation numbers, which I think are pretty high for us.
yes, and they will also go up every time that I've opened a building. Every time, whether it's an addition and renovation or a new building, circulation doubles and sometimes triples right away, no matter what your numbers are. Double or triple is the minimum. Because the buildings are fantastic. And really, what it is that I think lots and lots of communities have a kind of a core library user group that really understands what happens with the library. And then there's this larger group that thinks maybe the idea of a library would be great, but they don't really go there that often. Or when they do, they're not really finding what they need or what they want. And when you open up a new building, what you need and what you want is there. And I think people go and they're amazed because it really does work. And libraries I think are a critical part of the way that we work as
I
a
assume
society.
those numbers fall off over time, though, as the new toy becomes, oh yeah, we got a library.
Not that I'm aware of.
Really? Okay, good.
No, people are coming in and they're becoming library users is what's happening. Regular library users. And one of the reasons I love doing libraries is I can go to a community where they've opened a library that I did 10 years ago. They don't even know who I am anymore. And I can go in and I can work there, if I have a meeting someplace else. And they're really, really active. And they stay that way. I mean, little sleepy towns, 800 square foot building that had no place to sit is now 4,400 square feet and is jammed all the time, and it's been over 15 years.
So I just wanted to ask a question. You mentioned hazardous material.
Can you come to the microphones?
mic?
It's not for us, it's for the people on,
Or just pass it back.
and your name.
So Amy Tarlo Lewis.
Yep.
And so you mentioned hazardous materials, and I'm just sort of asking this question because it was an issue several years ago with the Russell Street School. There was an asbestos issue.
Yep.
And I don't know if there is known sealed asbestos or known exposed asbestos, because it's such an old building.
Yeah,
And there's
but
an
because-
linoleum in there. I just don't.
Because we're doing a new building, I may have mentioned hazardous materials.
That's right. You're not renovating. Scratch my question.
Yeah, and there's no building there that we need to take down. I'm not really expecting hazardous materials. This is going to be some controlled substances, like the pavement, for example, is a controlled substance. You can't just put that in a landfill. But typically what we're doing, especially on the lead building now, is if you're taking up any pavement, you grind it up in place and use it as a base for the new pavement. And it actually makes a better base than regular gravel. So we're not going to have any hazardous materials on the new building. I was trying to explain the types of things that fall into those soft costs. It's not just a fee for me and the owner's project manager. There's a list of 20 or 30 things in there.
And will you be using a lot of green materials, or?
Yes, there's points that are available for green materials, and it's also one of the things that we're trying to achieve is good indoor air quality. And so using greener materials and materials that don't have things like urea formaldehyde in them and so forth means that you're going to have a product that is greener to make and is safer for the people that are manufacturing it, and it's also better inside the building when you get inside. Readily renewable materials, quickly renewable materials, things like cork, for example, is a rapidly renewable material. When they take the cork bark off of a cork oak tree, the tree doesn't die.
Those poor wine bottles that are using plastic corks, I feel so bad for them.
But it's a great material, and it's soft on the feet. It absorbs sound like a carpet does, but you can kind of clean it like a linoleum floor. So we've used it in small meeting rooms and things like craft rooms because it's easy to clean, and the kids can sit on the floor and it's warm.
And I do like the back of the building, but I don't know, the front of it.
Okay. Thank you. Those are your kids' handprints there?
Grandchildren.
Oh, fantastic.
In 1996.
Love that.
They're all 6 feet tall now. It's very embarrassing.
Gotta have them make you a new one with big handprints.
My name's Judy Grandy. I live on Oak Ridge Road, and I am on the fundraising committee for the new library. You talked about how impressed the library commissioners are with an example of community involvement.
Yes.
Now, is it at the evaluation level that we should, I'm trying to figure out when we should start really hitting people, not hitting people, but
Well, the sooner
getting
you,
commitments.
the sooner you do it, the better. But you will have, you actually will have, the application is due at the end of January.
Right.
You have until June to provide additional materials to the Board of Library Commissioners. And so, for example, there's a couple of votes that you take at your town meeting in support of the application. You have until June to do those things. There's also some additional materials and so forth that you could send in. They're gonna want to find out how it voted, and then what the, you know, if there was a counted vote or if it was unanimous. Those are the kind of things they'd want to know. In addition to that, a record of the additional outreach that you've done, descriptions of a meeting like this that happens after the application goes in. All those things are great, and I would send those as a supplementary information to the application.
So if we could get commitments from citizens to provide a certain amount of money over the next
For
3 or 4 years?
fundraising? Oh, I would absolutely include that information, yeah. Just monetary support is great, and it's different from raising your hand and voting, but just as important to
right.
them. Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
So, just to clarify, not your question, but for going forward, in the May town meeting, we will have to have a couple votes for the library. One is that the trustees, the town has to approve the submission of the grant that we're doing now. We also need approval of putting the library on the site we're picking. And then there's the general housekeeping area that, I don't know if everyone's following it, but the site is actually under control of, partially under the school committee, partially under the selectmen, and there's going to be, I believe, a general article for the town to put the right portions of this entire complex that this is on under the control of the right authority for this.
So what if that
Who is
doesn't
that?
happen?
Wait,
So-
who is the right authority, first of all?
So,
This would be you.
well, the entire site is almost 50 acres. It's divided into 6 or so parcels right now. The town wants to divide it up into a school parcel and a town parcel. What we will need at town meeting is that whatever portion we carved out, which is roughly 3 acres, I think, is under, the library has the permission to use that site pending the grant application going forward. It doesn't have to be that this site is dedicated to the library regardless of what happens. It can be a contingency vote, right? But it will have to be, there
So
will
you
be.
have the permission of the town, or the Board of Selectmen, or all the 2/3 of the
We have the
vote?
school committee's permission right now.
Right now, the site is under control of the school committee, and we have permission to use the site. We will need permission of the town that what we're doing and putting a library there is okay.
That's
Does that
going to
go to-
require a 2/3 vote at town meeting in May.
Does that go to town vote, or?
The town meeting,
Okay. town meeting.
not a ballot, just a town meeting vote.
Gotcha. And what if that doesn't happen? What if people say, nope, we don't want to put the library there?
Then we'd probably have to, we'd have to probably pull the grant application, because there's nothing we could do at that point. We had to
No
pick.
other spot?
Hmm?
There's no other spot?
No.
Well, you had to submit the application with
Oh, I
a site,
understand.
and I don't think you could restart the process at that point. You'd have to wait till the next round, which will probably be about 8 years out, judging by historical, how often these things appear to come up.
And we looked at other sites in town. We looked at the Morgan property.
Right, I remember.
And we looked at the tennis courts, but this was the best choice to leave it within walking distance for the kids for school, and it just worked as like the compound
Yeah, it
is
seems
what
like a
people
good
are.
spot for it.
Yeah.
Would you also consider putting a lit path connecting the middle school to the library? So the kids can have easy access to it?
So,
There is a drive, you can just see it on the edge there, there's a paved drive that runs from Shattuck to the back.
there's a paved drive, it's not lit.
It's not
That
lit.
would be outside of our purview, but, as a taxpayer, I would support it.
Solar-powered lighting up there.
This is, I'm Yolanta Davis, 33 Shaker Lane.
That one. I can't put myself on the camera, so I'll scooch this way. The question I have is just in thinking, when you talked about the lighted path, they're putting lighting in for Alumni Field, and that kind of attaches to the whole Alumni Field complex. So maybe we want to throw that into them as far as the lighted pathway up Shattuck.
That's a good idea.
So I have a couple of questions, actually. One is I'm very glad to see, actually, first of all, thank you for a great design. I don't think anybody said that yet. And I'm glad to see meeting space, because I think if I'm not mistaken, the library has been using Park and Rec space for a lot of programs, so now you would have your own. So I don't know if that would open possibilities for working with Park and Rec for them to use the library space.
They already
and
do.
Which I can see that they would be quite excited about, because they would have more space to run their programs. Another nitpicky detail about the children's space is put the play area closer to the bathrooms. Yeah, because, the way you have it right now, I can imagine parents sitting with the kids more in the upper corner, and when the child needs to go, they really need to go fast. And then one question about the slope of the roof. Did you have any problems with this slope, or should the roof be steeper? Any leaking, or, winter? This is New England.
Oh, no, I don't think that you'll have any problems with this slope. The slopes that we're showing on the roof, we're actually showing them as clad in metal at this point. I don't expect that you're going to hold a lot on there.
All right.
There's going to be a lot of insulation up there, so really regardless of the slope, even if it was pitched at 45 degrees.
Okay.
Unless it gets really windy, the snow just sits up on roofs of newer buildings because there's so much insulation up there, there's very little heat loss.
So
But no, I'm not expecting.
So
any
the
heat.
library wouldn't have the problem again where it leaks and the books get damaged?
No,
and-
no, no. If your building leaks, then I've done something wrong and you should be calling me on the phone.
No, that would be great, thank you. Thank you very much. I
welcome.
hope
Thank
that
you.
we will see it happen.
Is there a potential for ice falling off the roof on the edges?
There is a potential for that, so we've tried to shed it off onto the areas where we don't have walking paths. Over in this area, we have the sidewalks out closer to the street, and then we have a grassy spot there.
Yeah.
So when the rain and the snow falls off the roof, we're trying to get that down into the landscape area rather than onto the sidewalk.
With this amount of glass, is there a way to treat the glass so that it doesn't constantly need to be cleaned by someone?
You can. There are types of glass that have that are coated so that they're very, very slick. There are even hydroscopic coatings that you can put on glass so that the rain won't even stick to them. They're almost like they're permanently waxed. That type of glass is extremely expensive, but we could certainly, when we get into design development, we could run some numbers on what the cost of that will be long-term versus the upkeep. And we're happy to run those numbers for you. When we have run it in the past, it typically it's more expensive to pay for it up front, especially given that you got about 25 to 30 years in an insulated glass panel before they begin to fail and fog up inside, before the seals around them start to fail, and then you have to replace them, and the replacement of those is expensive as well. And so that comes the first couple of years, actually, it's cheaper, right? But then when you start to get it further out and you start to get into a replacement, all of a sudden you have a big number that you have to start looking at. And if you want to start replacing them in kind, and my guess is that you would just put regular glass in there. And then so you'll have dirty spots and clean spots.
All right, fair enough, thank you.
It probably will be the way that works out.
Sure.
We're happy to do that for you.
Hi, Jean Sell, 53 Washington Drive. Talking about windows, will they be able to be opened?
Yes, not all of the windows in the buildings, all of these smaller windows we're planning on having as operable. And then we will have to have a discussion about what happens around in the rear portion of the building. It's a little hard to see. Get some kind of a ghost effect on here going on. But you can see in these larger expanses of windows, we have those broken down into smaller sizes. And so interspersed in there, we could certainly have operable windows, but not everything obviously would open. But all of these smaller windows that you can see kind of punched into the masonry, we're assuming that those all open.
When I visited libraries, when we were sent out to visit libraries to get ideals from others that were new, they built the new one in Wilmington, and no windows open in the building, and the staff said it is brutal there.
I didn't do that one. I don't know who did that. Typically, I can't think of a library that we've done. I was going to say recently, I can't think of a library that we've done, ever, that doesn't have operable windows in it, in at least a large portion of the building. There'll be some areas where, you may have a large space that has kind of an accent window that you're trying to use to bring in a lot of light and make a comfortable space for people to sit. And that large window may not have operable portions in it, but everywhere else in the building would have operable windows.
Phil, what's the large cement disc in the left rear of that building?
This guy right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It's a funny little thing that when I point it out on the site plan, you'll see it.
The UFO.
It's this thing right here. What it is you've got a good-sized existing tree. It's right up near the edge of the tennis courts.
So it's not part of the bill?
No. In order to get this parking lot in there, we needed to regrade this and make this grassy spot here a little steeper. And so I needed to create a well around that tree so that the tree didn't die and fall over.
Oh, thank you.
Wow.
You bet.
You tree hugger, you.
It's my job.
Do we know what the estimated maintenance costs are for the building?
I don't know that. And it's actually a state law that we calculate that during the design development phase. We haven't done it as part of schematic design, but knowing the operating costs of the building and what it costs to maintain it is something that we're obligated to do, so that you have those numbers.
So it's not critical for the grant phase?
No, it's not a reimbursable amount, and what it costs to take care of the building long-term is not something that they're interested in.
Okay, thank you.
There is probably money out of a separate pot that you get from the Board of Library Commissioners, right, for buying materials and maintaining it, isn't there? There's no aid that comes from the Board of Library Commissioners? Oh.
With this new land, are there any wildlife or wetlands concerns?
There are wetlands. These heavy green lines that you see on the plan here represent and I'll zoom in on that a little bit. So these represent the 25, the 50, the 75, and the 100-foot setback from the edge of the wetlands that was recently flagged back there. And so you can see at this point, just got a little bit of the building that kind of pokes into the 100-foot setback there. So we'd need approval locally from conservation in order to do that. And we tried to keep everything else out of the setback. There's that gravel road that runs pretty deep inside. It's actually inside the 25-foot setback. That's there already. And so we're hoping that they will allow us to improve that road. And we'll probably, in improving that road, we will probably improve the water quality of.
Do you need those approvals before the grant? Or is
No.
that,
Again, this grant, unlike a school, the grant process for the Board of Library Commissioners is much earlier on and much more flexible.
Good.
Schematic design only. You really just need to know, they just want to know that you have a viable project. And it's pretty much hands-off. They will give advice, but not really tell you what to do.
I realize it's very early in the process, but would you expect that whole patio area to have Wi-Fi coverage? Because I'm kind of thinking sitting out there with a laptop would be awfully nice.
Yeah, I would expect that the large portion of the parking lot around the building, out in the play field, in the walking paths in the woods, are going to have a little bit of Wi-Fi, provided that somebody doesn't shut it off on the weekends. I would expect that there will be cars parked in the parking lot, people checking their email.
Excellent, thank you.
Hi. Amy Caruth, Wilson Street. This looks very welcoming, and it looks like I love the plan. It looks great. I love the idea that there's a place to sit and eat. There's room for a quiet space for the young adults, and a place for story time. I'm curious, what's like the percentage increase for children's area and for young adults from the existing plan to this new one? I mean, from the existing facility. New one. And I'm sorry if it's on here, I couldn't.
It's on the second page. The young adult room is in fact getting a little bit smaller.
Oh, there it is. There it
It's
is.
going from 1,350 square feet to 1,000, but the children's area,
I think that what you're looking at there is,
oh, look at this.
yeah, so this is what's in the original program, and then these are our suggested modifications to the program. So that's not a comparison
Oh.
between what you have now.
Okay.
Oh, I'm
That's
sorry, I
that's the original
misunderstood
program
that.
and what we were suggesting. Once we went through this process, you'll recall, we did these analyses, right? And so once we put all the equipment, furnishings, chairs, book stack and so forth in the young adults room, we found that it really didn't need to be as large as it had shown on there. So we made some adjustments. Some things got a little bit bigger because they weren't big enough, and some things got a little smaller because they were a little bit too big, which is why we do the numerical plus the graphic analysis. So we made some minor adjustments. Things went up and down. You could probably answer the question better about
I know I increased it pretty much everything, but it's on the website.
Okay.
I can look it up for you and let you know.
Okay. And I'm just curious about plantings. Is that's a separate issue? That's not part of the...
We'll be part of the design, and when we get a little bit further along, we might have been showing a little bit. So we've started to show some kind of trees that kind of far along. We're actually showing some trees in the middle of the patio there. We're showing some
Okay.
trees and bushes along in the front. We're not landscape designers, but we will have one in the next phase. And so we needed to get a little something on there so the cost estimators had an idea what we were going to do. And so there is an allowance in the cost estimate for landscaping. Landscaping is one of those things that is not eligible for reimbursement, and so it needs to be pulled out on a separate line item on their form. There's a couple things they won't pay for. They won't pay for furnishings inside the building with the exception of steel book stacks. They'll pay for that. They'll pay for a circulation desk if you build it into the building, or if you buy it mobile at a later date. They'll pay for that. They won't pay for the chairs and tables. How you can open up a library without tables and chairs, I don't know, but they won't pay for that. They won't pay for landscaping. They won't pay for paving.
Okay. Okay, but you've got
They
the.
require parking spaces,
Mhm.
but they won't pay for the paving. How they made the decisions, I don't know, but that's the way it's always been.
Okay.
So there are exclusions.
There are exclusions, they're pretty small. And so there's some things that they'll pay for and
Paving's a
some
big
things.
one, though.
They will pay for your phone system. If you go into the teledata closet and there's a phone system mounted on the wall, it's got the computer equipment in it, right? It takes all the phone calls in and then it batches that out to the different handsets inside the building, right? They'll pay for the wiring out through the building. They'll pay for that piece of equipment that's mounted on the wall. They'll pay for the wire coming in from the street. They'll pay for the wire that goes up to your desk. It won't pay for the handset. They'll pay for all the wiring for the computers, but they won't pay for the computers themselves. So there's a couple things that they will exclude. And when I gave you that number of 47, 48%, something like that, that's the percentage of the total, and it assumes that all those things that are non-eligible are pulled away from it. So it's not a large portion of the project.
And what do we anticipate those pieces to be? What does it add to?
That's included in that bottom line that I gave you.
Okay, great.
And the percentage that I gave you is based on the fact that there are a couple of $100,000 worth of things in this large multi-million-dollar project. A couple $100,000 worth of things really that they won't pay for, that have to get pulled out.
Gotcha, thank you.
Sure.
So on a more positive note on that, we are applying for money that we're not spending as well, in that they will reimburse us for the land, even though we already own the land. So we're going through the process of figuring out how much the land is worth, which turns out to be way more complicated than you would think it would be. But we are trying to figure that out, and they will do a reimbursable at the 47 whatever % rate for the land. So it's effectively free money coming back to the town since it already owns the land. So we are looking at how to cover more of the cost so that the taxpayers don't have to, and like Judy said, we have a fundraising effort going on.
Right.
We have some trust funds and
What
whatever.
have we
we're trying-
raised through fundraising so far?
We are just getting started in that we actually haven't advertised anything. I know we've raised over $50,000 so far. We have trust funds. I don't know the exact number that we can apply to this, but or will apply to it, I should say, as well, that we can apply. So we're hoping to raise a lot more than that, but we actually.
Do you have a targeted amount for fundraising?
I'm not on the fundraising committee, so I can't speak to that, but it probably also depends on how much time we have.
Yeah,
Right,
sure.
So,
On the fundraising question, will there be like an opportunity to buy, I don't know, bricks in the front walkway or things out on the patio in the back and have your family's name?
so the fundraising committee is looking, we haven't talked specifically about bricks or things like that so far. We have talked about, the potential of like naming rooms or bookshelves or things like that. So I know they're investigating things like that, but I don't know how far that has progressed yet and what all the hurdles are for us to be able to do that. Whether what all approvals we need, how those are all going to work out, right? So it's hard to name bookshelves also unless you know how many bookshelves you have to sell. So.
Trees.
Just a comment about town support for the library. Can we include information from, I don't know if you are aware that we had master plan committee talking to citizens over the last half a year. And during the first meeting, pretty much every group that they talked to said that they would like a new library in town. So I think that would be one of the items that would be good to include in the report for the library.
Sure. Yeah, and if you didn't include that whole report, you could certainly mention it in the narratives. There's a variety of places where you need to describe things and so forth, what you've done.
This is not really a huge question. For town meeting, we're doubling, tripling
commensurate with the size of this library, how will that impact staffing requirements to now cover a facility that is now 2-3 times the size of the existing? And is that a game plan that is going to be articulated in advance of town meeting so that that is part of what we're voting on? Because I imagine it's going to require additional resources to staff and maintain a building of that size. And likewise, I know that the maintenance piece of it, the requirements to articulate that are not required in this phase of this, but it's something that I think is going to impact the town's decision as to whether or not they're going to support this project moving forward. Is that something that we can anticipate seeing in advance of any town meeting vote?
So, we're adding about 7,000 square feet to the building. Our current building is about 17,000 square feet. So we're looking at 23.
About 23,000.
23,000 square foot building. So yeah, we will be looking at how to staff the building. Right now, the staffing areas are pretty similar to what we have currently. So I don't know if we're going to really require to add that much more staff.
We try to keep that in mind when we're designing. We try to not do anything in the design that would require you to go out and hire additional staff. It's nothing about the design that means additional people are required. If your circulation numbers triple,
the spaces we're looking to add are like meeting spaces and spaces for more books and materials. It's not...
If your hours change or something like that, right? Depending.
What's going to happen with the old library space?
That's up to the selectmen and the town. They're doing I believe they're going to do a town hall study or something.
So at the November town meeting, there was a vote to, the town authorized $10,000, $20,000 to do a feasibility needs assessment study for the town office, the town hall. Based on that study, I would guess there will be recommendations to come back to say, you know, Park and Rec and Council on Aging and School Committee and all these need X amount of space. And then based on those results, there will be probably, you know, arm wrestling over who gets what space from the library or whatever going forward. Right. That's really outside of our purview as library trustees. It's, we get the same vote at town meeting as every other citizens on that. I know the Council on Aging is dying for more space. I think Park and Rec is as well. So I would guess one of those groups will be relocating into our space and, you know, a lot of shuffling going on.
Gotcha.
So, and
It will all get utilized.
yeah, I'm sure it will all get utilized. It will obviously be another expense to the town independent of this.
Well, that's what I'm thinking now, because the expense of new library plus the expense of new people and new renovations in the old space, what are those costs going to be?
So that's going to depend on how the new space, how the old spaces has to be renovated and and utilized. One of the ideas, the library gets reimbursed from the state for, you know, at the 47% rate.
Sure.
If you were to build a new teen center or Council on Aging center, I don't believe you get reimbursed anything. So by being able to reuse our existing space, yes, it will cost the town money to renovate, but it will be cheaper than building a new building for the seniors and the seniors want to be in that space because that's where it's happening in town for them, right? They're close to the town offices, it's close to Park and Rec. It's a real opportunity to build more of a real community center with a library and a teen youth center with Park and Rec and a senior center all together. I'm hoping that's what comes out of this town study.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what those dollar numbers are, because that really does affect.
Yeah, those are outside of our purview.
I understand.
Completely, but yes.
Definitely, thank you.
Do we know when that study will be done, or has it even started, or?
That's a question for the selectmen or PMBC. I'm not sure which one's running that, or it's the combination, but.
Is there a contingency plan? The land piece doesn't go through. How do we renovate the existing space for the library to make it palatable for the town?
There is no contingency plan.
So this is like an all-in?
If this doesn't go through, if If the town doesn't approve what we need in May, the trustees will have to go back and figure out what we would do going forward within our existing space, what improvements we could make. You know, obviously, we
Right.
probably have to come back to the town and ask for money to do whatever minor renovations we could do.
Right.
For whatever that,
Second level question, do we know what a $10 million version of this library would look like, an $8 million version would look like, as opposed to a $15 million? You know, have we looked at different sizes and scopes?
Well,
You want to give the town people a chance to say, yeah, I'm all in for an 8, I'm not in for a 15.
So to answer that a little bit, probably about a year and a half ago, we did a feasibility study. We surveyed the town. We went through, asked as many people as we could, had open meetings like this. We hired someone to do this design plan to say what spaces we needed in town in a new library. We threw out the ideas like, you know, we want a swimming pool in the library or a basketball court and things like that you get back. But this was this 24,000 square foot plan is what came out of that study.
Okay.
Right, that we had town input from before. We really can't go to the Board of Library Commissions and say, we like this option or this option or this option. You really have to pick one.
Okay.
And we picked this size based on the surveys and the feasibility studies we've done in the past.
Sure.
So,
And we're trying to go forward 40 or 50 years.
Right.
yeah, and the library is a 30-year plan?
Just 20-year minimum.
20-year, they're expecting it's a 20-year building plan, basically. So that's what they're calculating is your needs are based on.
Okay, so this building will suffice for the town for the next 20 years?
That's the goal.
That's the minimum requirement from the Board of Library Commissioners. The other thing that I will mention is that if you had done a program and come up with a 24,000 square foot building and you decided you were going to build 16, the overall cost may go from 15 million down to 10, but the Board of Library Commissioners would not participate in that. So the town's portion of a $15 million project would be 7.5 in round numbers, right? The town's portion of a $10 million building would be $10 million. You'd get 30% less and you'd pay 30% more. Because you wouldn't get a grant.
Gotcha.
What we also have to consider as a town is what is Littleton going to look like 5 to 15 years from now, population-wise? How many more people are going to be moving in? And how is that going to affect how our local town buildings are utilized? What is, the point going to do to how many people outside of the town start coming in? So, we have to think 10 to 15 years from now, can the building that we're currently in, can that be an appropriate space for the needs of what our community is going to be 10 to 15 years from now?
And I will say, when they did the feasibility study, they looked at UMass, I think, has population growth studies, and all of those numbers were factored in when they came up with, this is how big your box needs to be. So,
And is this building being designed with growth in mind? So 20 years from now, we're not knocking it down, we're looking for a new spot because we can't build onto it? Do we have the ideas that, hey, it can be built out this way, we can go up, we can go sideways, we can go down?
It is designed to be flexible, and it's one of those things you're going to need to show in your application that there's room for growth. They want to see that you can add on a minimum of 10%. You could extend this wing out to the right, for example, and you'd meet that and still be on your property. So, yeah, there is room for growth on this site. The building is not designed for you, at this point, for you to tear the roof off and then to put third floor on. That's extremely difficult to do, and invariably, because we have worked on projects that were designed originally to support an additional floor, but they're designed to support that additional load based on the code when they were built. The code changes every couple of years.
Sure.
And every time that we run into a building that was designed to support another floor or designed to support something, we run the numbers with the new code, and it isn't, invariably. So you could spend a lot of extra money to make a building support a third floor, and then you may end up
Never doing that. We just keep-
either never doing it or having to spend a lot of extra money to actually make it function at a later date. Adding on additional space, to the left or the right, or filling in part of the patio space at a later date would be the thing to do. More cost effective.
Sure, thank you.
And just one more comment with respect to your question. The fundraising committee very much wants to offset as much as possible. I know that there are people in town who, as individuals, want to be generous, but the fundraising committee is also looking into grants above and beyond the Mass Board of Library Commissioners that are sometimes done through corporate sponsorship or nationwide sorts of grants in order to decrease the taxpayer burden as much as possible.
What is the anticipated taxpayer burden on this project after the grants have been applied?
I'm not sure what the high end of the possible grant allotment would be, but with respect to calculating what would it cost us all over the cost of the time of 30 years or however that's done, and then that's done with an average idea of, what is it, a $300,000 house.
Right, and you're talking in terms of minutes,
yeah,
so.
that, I'm not exactly sure
Yeah, that's
how to
something we're
knock
going to have to
those.
speak with Bonnie about, once we have the
It
final.
would be helpful to have those before the vote.
Absolutely,
definitely.
I agree.
The numbers are very new.
Right.
A lot of folks here may be hearing the
We set up
numbers
until
from us
May town meeting to figure all that out.
Yeah, no.
the first time. Everything, the cost estimate really just
It would
came
definitely be
in.
helpful to have those numbers to make a decision.
Yes.
We want to do this again, right?
Yeah, so we will have more informational meetings, obviously, before town meeting.
Yeah.
This is just to give people a chance to comment on the design
Oh, it's a
before we
good start.
go through the grant application. There will be a lot more going forward.
You gotta redesign the front of that building though, Phil, come on.
There'll be both meetings before May and after, whenever, our numbers pulled for the grant.
Right.
We'll obviously be doing a lot more, because at that point, you need a whole nother round of taxpayer support.
Sure.
So, are there any more questions before we move on? Going? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. I will add, if people have comments on, you don't like the front of the building, if you have ideas on what to do, you can get them to Sam or myself, and we'll relay them off. Okay. Correspondence. Did everyone have a chance to go through the minutes? Or any comments on the minute from April or December 1st?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes of December 1st?
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We normally have a treasurer's report here. We have to do a quick treasurer's number. Basically, Peter handed out the Bartholomew funds. We have to vote which funds to take the money out of for our portion of, for the trust fund portion of the state aid voted in the budget. So we need $13,000. So my suggestion is to take, what we typically do is take it out of the ending earnings numbers.
Right.
So my suggestion is to pull the money from 109, 110, and 112 accounts, taking those ending earnings down to zero, and then taking the rest from the Bradford Sampson to equal our 13,000.
You said from 109, 110, and 111?
Yes, so that gives us like
I'm sorry, 112.
That gives us like 6,500, and then
Yes.
you take 6,500 from Bradford Sampson.
And which one, where's the number for Bradford, it's 107, okay.
Bradford is Bradford's
107?
Yeah.
Okay, so I make a motion that we draw those funds to supplement or match the state grant?
That's the trust.
The trustee,
the trust
right.
fund portion of our materials
Okay,
budget.
so I make a motion that the trust fund portion be drawn from the Rita I. Bean Fund, the John Hilton Star Fund, the Edward Potter Sanderson Fund, with the remaining balance to be drawn from the Bradford Sampson Fund.
second?
A second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And then Pete gave me the MMDT before he left.
Okay.
It's as of January 4th, $13,751.09.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Okay.
Director's report.
All right, so I've hired 3 appraisal firms to begin appraising the slope site. The firms are T.H. Rensterna, LLC, for $3,750, Foster Company for $3,200, and G&J Manfra for $3,500, for a total of $10,450. They've all begun already, and they anticipate to have their appraisals soon. On December 8th, the school committee voted to transfer the slope site to the library. Trustees contingent upon the library receiving the grant, and 2/3 vote at town meeting in May of 2017. There was a leak over the stairs between the ground and main floors. Bill fixed it. And we held the library staff meeting on December 20th to discuss circulation procedures, the upcoming winter reading program, and the library building project. We also held a small holiday brunch. Under programming, the Children and Teen Winter Reading Program has begun. James has started his Girls Who Code programs and a Dungeons and Dragons club. There will be a tiny house program on Thursday, January 12th at 7 in the Cooper Room. Northeast Tiny Houses will give a presentation on the trend towards smaller living and the popularity of tiny houses. And on January 19th at 7, we're showing the movie The Girl on the Train in the Cooper Room. Under workshops, I attended a Beyond Surveys workshop at Hamilton Wyndham on December 7th, a membership meeting at MVLC on December 13th, and a grant workshop at Northampton Library on December 14th. I also met with Edith Salzman and Roland Gibson to discuss a 6-week adult program they want to offer in the library called Matters of Race in the United States. It'll be an adult learning course where attendees will discuss matters of race in the U.S. From 1776 to 2016, providing history, and Roland will provide history on the topic. The program begins on March 22nd.
Did you talk with Alicia at all about that, or does she, just to make sure that she knows that it's going on?
I have, our next meeting will be in February, so it will be before that meeting. Before that.
Just give her a heads up.
I definitely will. On January 3rd, at a department head meeting, we were informed of new public records laws that were signed by Governor Baker. The law requires that the town create records access officers. Commonly requested records will be posted online, and we must respond to any request within 10 days. And the penalties for non-compliance have been increased. The current record access officers are Diane Corey, the town clerk, Keith Bergman, I think the police chief is one too, and there are a few others that I can't remember. So basically what they are responsible for doing is making sure that whatever records, public records, are needed or requested are basically accessible. So that means putting them online. That means this report now will also be posted along with the trustee minutes. Anything we discuss, like this project, will also be posted along with the trustee minutes. It'll all be put on the town website and made available. Yeah, so, and basically, emails also count towards that, so personal emails can be checked and searched from the trustees, so that's why we have Littleton Library accounts now. And then Super Saturday is this Saturday, January 7th, and I'll make a presentation on fiscal year 18 budget to the Selectmen and FinCom at 10:40 a.m.
On the open meeting, does the videotape of this also apply?
I think so. I think I have to post a link to it.
Judy said yes.
Yes, Judy says yes, so it must be true. Okay?
Okay.
All right, and then the rest is just stats
And Super Saturday,
and Super Saturday.
it's 10:40
10:40 a.m.
is your appointment.
Yes, that's why I go.
I will try to come as well.
I'd like to, on your stats, I'd like to thank Gloria Rios and the Girl Scouts for their Christmas tree and the $317 they raised for the children's room Christmas tree.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions on the director's report? Okay, quarterly budget report?
Okay, so for this quarter, we are pretty much right on track. We spent 46.2% of our salaries budget, so that's pretty much right on track. We're about halfway through the year. Under expenses, we're doing pretty well. Books, we're right on target. We spent about 65% of that. I think Helen plans to finish books off within the next month or two.
Yeah, usually I like to change over by February if we can.
So then we'll switch over to trust materials and later gift. The state aid, I've been told, will be added to our account in January. They have to approve it first. And then, right, so state aid will be added later this month or next month. We'll anticipate about half of that, which is about $6,000. And then we'll receive the second $6,000 later in the year. We've spent everything in the planning grant as required by MBLC, so that's gone. Trustee gifts, that's MMDT, as was reported earlier. And we have a gift budget right now of $9,185.22. The Friends budget for museum passes is at $5,317. And the Friends budget for the Friends account is at, for programming, is at $4,388.96. Any questions?
Are we buying more furnishing still?
Yeah, we still have about half of it left, so.
What are we anticipating buying?
We're not sure yet, but Helen and I were talking about that earlier.
What are you thinking about?
Maybe new chairs to replace those, I believe, chairs that are always getting dirty in the programming room, in the Cooper room, or maybe other things, we're not sure.
Okay.
Some of the, like, underneath the chairs in the Cooper room have, like, we're always cutting them with the scissors because they're fraying.
Yeah.
And we've had them cleaned once. I don't know if Judy was still here, we can ask, how old are they and when we bought them?
I do not know that. I know we had them cleaned they were cleaned last year.
Year before, wasn't it?
No, it was last.
Was it
was
last year?
It was after the book sale last year. that
And
they were cleaned.
we're permitted to bring chairs that we buy in 2017 to a new library in 2019, or whenever it might be a move-in date.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Anyone else have anything? Oh.
So my seat for 3 years is up, my term, and I will not be rerunning, so my seat will be open if anyone in the audience or in cyberspace are interested in running. I believe papers have to be pulled or returned by March 16th or something like that. I can't remember the actual deadline, but talk to Diane Crory, she'll have the information. So just wanted to let everybody know. Anybody out there interested?
Thank you.
All right. I make a motion to adjourn?
I second it.
All in
Aye.
favor?
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.